Do you know what you're doing? So obviously the police had told him that accused number 4 was involved. I fully support that letter. You are putting doubt in Danzi's confession by saying that he could have misled you by using the name Thokoziseni. Gininda. And I'm just like, oh, bring the bomb, please.
And I'm bad like the Barbie. I'm a doll, but I still wanna party. Pink felt like I'm ready to bend. I'm a 10, so I pull in a 10. Like Daddy, all of the Barbies is pretty damn. All of the bodies is bad.
Hello and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Nogwazi Ntombela, also known as Kwazibe on all social media platforms. Do subscribe, be a part of this family, and if you are a returning subby, welcome back, darling. Now, as you know, every week I bring you proceedings in the Senzo Meyiwa trial, and I'm here to do exactly that. Before I get into this video, there are a few people that are complaining that they don't receive notifications when I post my videos. So guys, next to the subscribe button, right, there's a little bell there. Just click on that bell and click on all so that you're notified every time I upload a post, and therefore you do not miss a post. And when I say don't miss a post, I don't just mean the Senzo Meyiwa case posts. You don't miss a single post from me, guys, like period. Please watch the rest of my videos as well. I would really appreciate it, and it will help me grow even more. And also, some people don't know how they can go about supporting the channel financially. There is a button at the bottom next to the like button written thanks. You can click on that button and you can choose any amount from 39 Rand that you would like to contribute towards the channel. Now, with all that being said, let us get into the proceedings of the week. So this week was a very short week in court because we literally had 1.5 days of proceedings literally. So on Monday the 18th of November, there was a letter that was sent to court, and Judge Rata then read it out. It was basically from a member of the public who was concerned with regards to the timekeeping in the court. The letter goes into detail about how the court always starts late, how they go on long tea breaks, and then they want to adjourn early, and then there's also like little breaks in between the court that causes them not to sit for long. So this is a concern that was raised by the member of the public, and the judge seemed to take offense to this letter. But in all honesty, that guy was not wrong. I fully support that letter. Because first of all, yes, they indeed do not start at 10 o'clock. The court is supposed to start at 10, but most of the time, without fail, it's usually 10:15 or even 10:30. So they never start on time. Yet when they have to leave, they always want to leave before 3:30. And another concern, obviously, with the tea breaks, they'll be saying it's a short adjournment for 15 minutes and end up taking 45 minutes. It is a major concern, especially when it comes to the accused, because really this justice is taking way too long. Now, before Ramosepele continued with his cross-examination on Monday, my lawyer just wanted to point out that Ramosepele had stated something the previous week, and it was with regards to the source that Gininda said he received the information with regards to accused number 1 and 2. And he did read into the record some of the cross-examination that Umgomezulu did do with Gininda in the trial within a trial, and it pointed out that Gininda did in fact mention Absalom Zungu's statement during the trial within a trial. Now, on Monday, when Ramosepele started his cross-examination, I thought that he was starting off strong, because he did mention that he reserved the confessions HH and JJ for interrogation towards the end. He then touches on the fact that he wants to see the markers of reliability and unreliability of the two confessions. So this was when I was like, yes, now we're getting into the confessions. And then he starts by reading one of the first confessions, which mentions a call received from Thokoziseni. This confession says Ndanzi received a call mid-October from Thokoziseni, and he could hear Mapisa in the background. Now, the question that Ramosepele asked is that now that this case has gone this far, we now know that accused number 4 is Thokoziseni, right? And Gininda says no, because Ndanzi didn't mention the surname or the ID number, he was unable to make a follow-up. And then he goes to say, but Mapisa is accused number 4. So I'm just like, Thokoziseni and Mapisa is the same person in this case from our understanding, but yet now you're trying to make it seem like Thokoziseni is a completely different person. Seriously? Ramosepele then also puts this assertion from Danzi to say that the reason why he was able to talk about the 26th of October is because Gininda had brought up the date to him when he was interrogating him on the 17th, as well as on the 16th when he was arrested by Mokgane. So Gininda clearly says that he wouldn't have changed the statement. If he had mentioned the date, then he would have said that he mentioned the date, but he never mentioned the dates and was very surprised that Ndanzi out of the blue just mentioned the 26th of October. The next thing that Ramosepele touches on is the issue of Umthokoziseni, where he says accused number 2 denies knowing anyone by the name of Umthokoziseni, and also that he couldn't have said that he was on a call with Umthokoziseni when he made a confession. Gininda's response to this is that he can't really go into details with regards to what Ndanzi said to Rapadu, as he was not there when the confession was written. And also Ndanzi didn't mention any ID numbers, so he doesn't even know if this person actually exists. So now my thing is, you already putting doubt in Danzi's confession. You are putting doubt in Danzi's confession by saying that he could have misled you by using the name Thokoziseni. Gininda, do you know what you're doing? Then also says that he did a follow-up with regards to these two names that were mentioned, being Mthokoziseni and Mapisa, and he figured that accused number 4 is Mapisa, but Mthokoziseni, he couldn't associate anyone with that name. Ramosepele then goes on to asking Gininda that accused number 4, you said that his name did come up before with the previous investigating officers, and Gininda does agree to this, which means that accused number 4 was a suspect before Gininda became a part of the investigating team. And Gininda then goes on to say even Senzo Meyiwa's father, the late Sam Meyiwa, also said accused number 4 was implicated in this case. So now my question is, first of all, how did Sam know that? Because the only way that he knew of any involvement of people in this case was through the police. So obviously the police had told him that accused number 4 was involved. He didn't do his own investigation. It's not like he went around looking for the murderers of his son. He was told by the police. He was briefed by the police. And so when he did that interview saying that Ingabi are involved, that's because that is what the police fed him. When Ramosepele puts the assertion that Danzi never knew Mapisa until they appeared in court in 2020 in October in Boksburg, then Gininda says that can't be true because Sfiso Zungu says they know each other. First of all, we don't even trust Zungu's statement. And then he goes on to mention 3 or 4 other people being someone Wagandwandwe, and then Jack Buthelezi, and as well as Makosonke, saying they also have statement that say that accused number 2 actually knows accused number 4. Now this is new evidence before the court, because all along we've been under the assumption that the only people that were the source of Danzi's link were Absalom and obviously Constable Zungu. Now all of a sudden he's saying Jack Buthelezi also linked him, as well as Makosonke, as well as a gentleman Wagwandwandwe. So now this is new evidence. Firstly, it was never led. We're at the end of our trial and this information was never led. Then Danzi calls Ramosepele and points out that Jack Buthelezi in the trial within a trial never spoke about this particular statement that Gininda is referring to. His involvement in the trial within a trial was just to talk about how he met him at the courts and how he needed money to buy cosmetics and all of that. That was all his testimony was about when he came in the trial within a trial. But now Gininda is making it seem as though when Jack Buthelezi came to testify, he also testified about Danzi's involvement in the case, which was never the case. Just as the issues of Makosonke and then Ndwandwe and Jack Buthelezi issue was still being raised, Mnisi then stands up and says Gininda has a tendency of wanting to bring evidence through the back door, of which I agree with, because the fact that he's now talking about statements that were never led and he wants to refer to those statements to make his case seem strong, for me was saying, yeah, literally bringing those through the back door. Baloyi then argues that the reason why Gininda is answering these questions and mentioning these people, it's because it was elicited by Ramosepele, of which that doesn't make sense either, because Gininda has a tendency of going on his own little tour when you ask him simple questions. You'll be asking him a simple question and he will go on an escapade to try and confuse you. So Baloyi is saying that it was elicited by Ramosepele. In my opinion, that was just not on point. Kininda then notifies the court that all of these statements were given to the defense before the trial, so he doesn't understand what the issue really is with him talking about those statements. Now, the issue that Ramosepele says, he says, let's just make this clear. When we were handed over those statements that Kininda is referring to, first of all, they had no names. The names were scraped off for the safety of those witnesses, so they had no clue which statement belonged to who. They then requested a short adjournment just so that the defense can get their stuff together. And Ramosepele basically dropped a bomb on all of us because he told us that he is immune to social media and basically he will not dance to our tune, right? Referring to the letter that was sent obviously at the beginning of the case on Monday, saying that everybody's wasting time. So he felt that with them requesting the short adjournment to get their stuff together, he wanted to address that so that they don't say that the defense is wasting time yet again. After the adjournment, Ramosepele continued with his cross-examination and touched on the issue of this case being of public knowledge and what information the police actually share with the media. And the one question that he asked Kininda is the fact that wouldn't Ntanzi know about this case and when it happened because it was in the media? Kininda's response was, yes, the case was in the media, but he found it surprising that 6 years later, when he's questioned about it, he remembered the exact date. Ramosepele then asked Kininda, like after the first confession, what is it that he did after receiving it? Kininda then says he did some follow-ups, he checked on the names that were mentioned in the confession, as well as some cell phone records, obviously as time goes on, as well as the firearm and all that information that needed to corroborate into this confession. Then he continues to say that accused number 2 says that Kininda approached him, and when he approached him, he asked him about Mapisa, he asked him about Nkani, he asked him about the Buthelezis. He also mentioned something about the taxi industry, and Ntanzi's response to that was that he doesn't know all these people and he has no knowledge about anything in the taxi industry. Now, if you guys remember, I did say all of this comes from the taxi violence cases. You will remember this part, right? And Kininda clearly says that he had no knowledge of accused 3, 4, and 5 before Ntanzi's confession. The only knowledge that he had was of the Buthelezis brothers based on Muzisbiya, accused number 1's confession. Ramosepele then asked if Exhibit HH, being the confession, had any elements that were not known to Kininda that were mentioned by accused number 2. And he says, yes, it's the names of accused 3, 4, and 5. Then Ramosepele goes to the next question where he says, but Zungu came to this court and told us that he met you and Perumal. And when he met you too, he did mention the names of accused 3, 4, and 5 and also provided photos of accused 1 and 2. Kininda denies this and he says that when they met with Perumal, it was just for Zungu to update them that he has convinced his father to come forth and actually write a statement with regards to what he knew about the case. Now Ramosepele gets into the juicy bits where he asks about the second confession that was made to Magistrate Krunia, and he says, what was the reason that you required a second statement? Kininda then goes on to explain that there were some talks or discussions that were made with the NPA and an attorney, so therefore they deemed it necessary for them to go and get a confession from the magistrate. Ramosepele then asked Kininda if he's aware of the inconsistencies in the statements, and Kininda says, well, he wasn't looking for the inconsistencies, he was looking for corroboration or collaboration, as he puts it. Just when I thought Ramosepele is now getting into the juicy bits, he leaves that question and then asks about the ID parade. And he asks, why is it that you did an ID parade when Mr. Mbata was arrested previously? However, you didn't do an ID parade for accused number 2. Kininda's response is that this is because Mtokozi Sitwala as well as Tumelo Madlala were unable to point out the second intruder. Well, at least Tumelo says he was 50-50 about the about being able to identify the second intruder, and Mtozi Sitwala says he would not be able to identify the second intruder. So that was the reason that the ID parade was not done. Ramosepele then starts putting Ndanzi's version to Kininda, and I know when a person starts putting the version at the end, that's nearing the end of the cross-examination, and I was worried. So he starts telling Kininda that accused number 2 denies ever being at the Khumalo household. He denies any involvement in the contract killing. He denies knowing the accused before the court. He denies knowing Kelly Khumalo. And as he's putting these versions to Kininda is keep on answering him and saying, well, if he denies knowing accused number 3, 4, and 5, Zungu says he knows them. And Ramosepele doesn't argue to say, well, those confessions, he even denies those confessions and all of that. He just continues just saying, this is the version, this is the version. And I was getting so frustrated because put it to Kininda that this confession was fake according to accused number 2. So anything that you're saying comes from the confession, like, even bothered about, like, put it to Kininda, put it to him. And when he says that accused number 2 also denies knowing Kelly Khumalo, Kininda says, yes, that I can agree with, because he does say that he doesn't know Kelly Khumalo in his confessions. So they then took a long adjournment, and after the long adjournment, Ramosepele had a few more questions for Kininda before he completed his cross-examination. And one of those questions was there any further investigation after the second confession was taken that led you to research more about the second confession as compared to the first? And Kininda then starts mentioning a Simpiwe Buthelezi who implicated accused number 3 and 4. Mnisi objects to this because what does the implication of accused 3 and 4 have to do with the question that Ramosepele asked? Mnisi then says Kininda has this tendency of waddling around and bringing in new information. Yes, the state is going to call this Buthelezi character. Can Kininda actually stop mentioning people or statements of people that are not on record? The judge asks who is the Simpiwe character that Kininda is referring to. Kininda says it's a person that has a statement in the docket which was deposed on the 4th of July in 2020. However, he has since passed away. That then concluded Ramosepele's cross-examination, and it was over to Advocate Mnisi. Now, before Mnisi started with his cross-examination, he questioned with regards to a statement that Kininda referred to that proves a communication between accused number 3 and Kelly Khumalo. Now, this caused an uproar in courts because Baloyi confirmed that there isn't a statement that shows a communication between Kelly and accused number 3, and he does indicate that he had spoken to Mnisi in the morning and advised him that there is no such statement. But Kininda, on the other hand, was adamant that there is a statement that proves communication. And now what is surprising about what Kininda says is that initially he had said there is communication. He even says, in a nutshell, there was communication between accused number 3 and Kelly Khumalo. But on Monday, when Mnisi was talking about the said statement, it's now all of a sudden, no, it wasn't a communication, it was a link. Now, my question is, what link are you talking about? Because you yourself told the court that you don't know the source of the photos on all of the 3 people's phones, being Longwe, Kelly, and accused number 3. So if you don't know the source, what link are you referring to? Now, as this is going on, Kininda then changes and says, yes, I said link. I never said communication. Kininda, you said communication. But anyway, they then argued that point, and there was a lady that was called to court, and she says that she sent a statement through to Baloyi last week. Now, the statement that she's referring to is a statement of Colonel Steyn, which is Exhibit 01. Now, this statement in particular does not talk about a communication between accused number 3 and Kelly Khumalo. However, it talks about the link between Kelly Khumalo and the other people that were suspects in this case. So when Baloyi initially said there is no such statement that refers to a communication between accused 3 and Kelly Khumalo, he was indeed correct, because Steyn's statement doesn't talk about a communication, it talks about what? A link. So now Baloyi ends up changing and wanting to support Kininda in saying, no, he does have Exhibit O, and Exhibit O was handed up before the court, basically gaslighting Mnisi into thinking that he's crazy because Kininda said there's a statement talking about communication, and now you're bringing a statement by Steyn that talks about links and not communication. Like, who's the idiot here? Who is the idiot? The judge then requests Keninda to actually read Colonel Stain's Exhibit 01, which didn't make sense to me because this whole exhibit is before the court. Stain led that evidence, and Stain has come to this court twice to talk about the same evidence, and there's no way where Stain says accused number 3 was in communication with Kelly Khumalo. No way. The one thing that was interesting about the target being Kelly Khumalo in this case is that they went through some of the numbers that she had in her contact, one of them being the number of General Sibiya. Interesting times. Keninda then emphasizes that he never said communication, he said links, and he requests that there's a cordial respect in court when it comes to the decorum. And I'm just like, are you threatening Mnisi? Because he says if Mnisi wants to take it that route, then I can take it there. Was that a direct threat to Mnisi Keninda? After Keninda reads Stain's statement, the judge says he is satisfied that this is the same statement that was led during Stain's testimony, and he gave the defense time to basically go and read as if they don't read. He even says it seems like not all of us read here. Like a little jab to the defense. Those were the proceedings for Monday, and court was adjourned till Thursday due to Keninda writing exams on Tuesday and Wednesday. Now, after the proceedings on Monday, guys, I will admit I was fuming. I was disappointed. I felt as if Ramosepele did not do justice for Runtanzi. I felt as if he didn't defend him well enough. I felt as if there were so many points that he did not touch on, and I was not understanding why he's not touching on those points. And I've just written down some of the points that I felt that he needed to touch on and basically put to Keninda that these are false. This is not how this happened, and so on and so forth. One of those points being the issue of Ndanzi's cell phone. He did not touch on the issue of Ndanzi's cell phone and how a cell phone which is said to have been confiscated was then found on Ndanzi almost 6 months after his arrest. It did not make sense that he didn't touch on those for me. I felt as if justice for Ndanzi was not done. In all honesty, I was angry. I was livid. The second thing that I felt he didn't really press too much on is the issue of the gold tooth and how a witness says that the person that was at the scene had a gold tooth, and also the issue of the dreadlocks. The fact that they're mentioning so many people now that had dreadlocks and so many people now that had a hoodie on, that it's not corroborating anymore. He didn't touch on that. And then the third thing, which is the most important thing that I was frustrated with Ramosepele on, was the fact that he didn't touch on confessions and the discrepancies on those confessions, because Keninda clearly worked on the corroborations that he found in the confessions. I was wanting Ramosepele to hit on the discrepancies, to poke holes in those confessions in order for Ndanzi to walk. My anger came to a complete standstill on Thursday when Mnisi started his cross-examination. Immediately, the first question Mnisi asked was with regards to what is done when a person is arrested in terms of the searching, the confiscating of items and all of that. And I was like, okay, I guess the defense has some type of strategy that Ramosepele would leave these things and the others would touch on them so that they catch Keninda off guard. And I was over the moon. So Keninda does explain the process that when a person is arrested, they search him, they seize his items, and if those items are not going to be part of exhibits in the case, then they obviously put into the SAP 22, where they keep the belongings of that person until such a time that they select a next of kin that can come collect those things, or when they are released, then those things are given to them. But if they are going to be used as exhibits, then they are booked into the SAP 13, and there's a whole process that goes on, and after the case is closed, then those things are either sent to be destructed or they're given back to the accused. Mnisi then goes into the detail of Ndanzi's arrest, and I was literally jumping for joy. How Ndanzi was arrested, who arrested him. After that, they were going to go to Carltonville to confirm his alibi and all of that. He goes into detail with those questions, and the one question that he asked is the fact that after Ndanzi's arrest, did you receive any type of briefing from Mohane and Mabena? Keninda does agree that he was briefed that there's a person that has been arrested, and he says that he was arrested for the Nongoma case. Then Mnisi goes into a very interesting fact where he says, well, you said that it was surprising that Ndanzi remembered the date of the 26th. why do you find it surprising? Because according to Mohane, when they arrested him and when they questioned him about his involvement in Senzo Meyiwa's death, they did mention, excuse me, they did mention the date to him. And Kininda says, well, he was not there, and also he was not briefed about that. Now, as Mnisi is asking this question, Baloyi then objects and requests that Mnisi refers to the transcripts, whereby Mohane says that. Mnisi's response to that is, I'm not going to go into this transcripts because I am cross-examining based on my notes. If you feel that what I'm putting to this witness is incorrect, you should go and do your research and go into the transcript and tell us on so-and-so date, this is actually what Mohane said. I'm not going to go into the record and do your job for you. And I was like, yo, Nisi is not here to play. He even goes as far as saying, unless you want us to adjourn so that I can go through the records and give you that information. Then Baloyi says, no, it's okay, continue. Nisi then also questions the reason why Kininda actually joined them to go to Carltonville when Mohane and Mabena went to confirm his alibi. He asked, what was the reason for you to go there? Because Mohane and Mabena could have easily done that on their own and then briefed you afterwards. Kininda says, well, because he was available, he decided that he would join them. Now, Mnisi also touches on a very important aspect that was touched on in the trial within a trial, but obviously because the defense counsels for accused 3, 4, and 5 weren't really involved in the trial within a trial, Nisi wasn't able to ask these questions then. The question that he poses to Kininda, he says, you are a senior officer and a well-decorated brigadier, right? And you know the processes that need to be followed every time you speak to a suspect, and referring to the warning statement or a particular form that the police use every time they interview a suspect. Nisi also goes into detail about how South Africa is governed by the Constitution and everything falls under the Constitution. So he questions, the first time you met Undanzi was when you took him for his alibi on the 18th, yet there's no warning statement. The second time you interviewed him with regards to the identikit, there's still no warning statement. So Kininda then tells the court that the warning statement is just a guideline. It's not compulsory for them to use it all the time. And also he's seen many police officers during investigating that don't actually use the warning statement. So now my question is, are we just doing things as we please in the police service, or do we actually follow procedure? Because according to Kininda, procedure is not followed in the police stations. Procedure is not followed when warning statements are meant to be done. Like, I found it so surprising. Nisi even goes as far as saying, because this is what Kininda is saying, he would actually ask the court to call on General Fani Masemola to come to court to come and explain what this form is actually for and how it should be used. Because according to Kininda, it's not compulsory, it's a guideline. And he even says that there are so many different types of forms that are used as warning statements, and they're all guidelines, they're not protocol. The court then took a short adjournment, and after the adjournment, it was indicated that the advocates and the judge would be traveling to Thohoyandou for a colleague's funeral. So therefore, they requested that the court adjourn at 1 o'clock on Thursday. So after the short adjournment, Nisi continued with his cross-examination with the expectation that he will conclude at 1 o'clock. Now, the next question Nisi asks is, when was the accused arrested? He says on the 16th of June in 2020, but it was for the Nongoma case. And then he says, when did he make his confession? His first confession, he says, on the 19th of June to Rapadu. And the second confession, it's on the 24th of June to Cronje. And then he says, when did he make his first appearance for this case? And Kininda says on the 27th of October in 2020. So then Mnisi questions, from the time that he made the confession in June of 2020, he only appeared in court in October of 2020. What was the reason why it took so long? Then he goes on to explain that there were some talks about a plea deal, but it didn't come to fruition, and he even says that he doesn't want to go into detail about that because the state has indicated that he shouldn't touch on that. And then he goes on to explain about how accused number 1, they did this. And then Mnisi says, please, can you confine yourself to accused number 2? I never asked you about accused number 1. I'm asking you specifically about accused number 2. The judge then interjects and says, no, but Mr. Mnisi, he's explaining. And Mnisi says, that is not procedure. This person is very experienced in court and how court works. When I ask a question, I need him to answer the question and not go on his little escapade of explaining things to me. And during his explanation of the whole process and how it came about that the NPA became involved, Gininda then mentions that the NPA had discussions with Ntanzi and his attorney on the 23rd of June, the day before he was meant to go to Magistrate Kunia to make a confession. Now, what is interesting about this is that now the name Mjiyako pops up and Mnisi's like, yeah, actually, let's get into Mjiyako. He says, talking about Mjiyako, let's take it back a bit. So Ntanzi is arrested on the 16th. He's explained his rights and he says he doesn't want a lawyer. He's then taken for a confession. He's then taken on the 18th to his employers where his rights are explained again and he says he doesn't want a lawyer. And then on the 19th, he goes for a confession. He says he doesn't want a lawyer. And then on the 23rd, all of a sudden, he wants a lawyer. Yeah, right. Then Mnisi says, you are aware that 2020, during the time of Ntanzi's arrest, COVID was at its peak. And he says yes, and like there were certain restrictions with prisons and police stations and hospitals. Gininda says yes, and it's like, okay. He says, before I proceed, on the 23rd, where you say there were discussions with the NPA and Mjiyako and Ntanzi in Pretoria North, were you part of those discussions? And he says, no, but let me explain. And then Mnisi says, no, please don't explain. This is a yes or no question. And he even says, this little sermon that you're giving me is not requested. Baloyi then objects and says, no, this is not simply a yes or no question. He needs to explain. But what is he explaining? Because if I ask you, were you part of the discussions? You should be able to say, no, I was not part of the discussions, but I was called maybe once to come and do this. Or yes, I was part of the discussions. And then Nisi would ask, okay, what was said in those discussions? Or what part did you play in those discussions? You understand? But no, Gininda is already thinking ahead and predetermining the questions that are going to come, and therefore he answers in advance. Then Mnisi says, I'm surprised by the state's objection. In fact, I'm really shocked because Brigadier Gininda, it's not the first time he's coming to court. He knows how questions should be answered. When I ask a question, it's a yes or no question. You answer with yes or no. And if you say yes, then I'll ask you to explain. But otherwise, there's no need to go into an explanation. Then Gininda says, no, I appreciate that, but I've been answering questions with yes and no. And I was like, where? What questions have you ever answered with yes or no? Because when you will go to Mhlanga with your explanations, you never just say yes, Your Honor, or no, Your Honor. You explain. You're an explainer. Now Mnisi then asks, okay, now that we're over that, how did Mjiyako know about Ntanzi's arrest? Mjiyako's response is, I don't know and I never asked. But if I recall, in the trial within a trial, I remember something about Ntanzi's sister being mentioned. Now, I'm not sure if it was mentioned by Gininda. I'll have to go back into my notes and check. But I remember someone saying that Ntanzi's sister is the one that arranged Mjiyako. Now, Gininda doesn't know. As he answers the questions with that I don't know, then Mnisi says a bomb is coming now. And I'm just like, oh, bring the bomb, please. Bring the bomb, please. And the judge then asks for time. And when it's indicated that it's about 12:30, Nisi then says, it's getting really heated and I would appreciate it if we could adjourn now, if that's not a problem. The judge then says, no, Nisi, just continue until 1 o'clock. And in my opinion, the bomb that Nisi was about to drop was not, he was not able to drop on Thursday. So he continued with a few other questions that had nothing to do with where he was going with the Mjiyako questions. The first thing he said was, okay, let's get into Mjiyako, right? And as he says that, I think, well, obviously we cannot see the witnesses in court, but I think Gininda sort of looks away and Mnisi is like, Brigadier, look at me. Look at me. I was like, okay, it's going down. Then Mnisi asked Keninda, do you know Mjiyako? Keninda's response, I don't know him, I've never met him, and that was the first time meeting him. I know that he worked for the police, but... And I'm just like, why is your explanation so long? Why is your explanation so hurried? Do you know Mjiyako, yes or no? Like, my guy. And then Mnisi's next question was, so you met Mjiyako for the very first time on the 23rd of June in 2020? And he says, yes, that was the first time. I had not met him individually. So I'm like, what does he mean individually? Isn't Mjiyako an individual person? Isn't Mjiyako an individual person? What does he mean he had never met him individually? Has he met him as a group? Has he met him as a company? Mjiyako is a person. He is an individual. What do you mean you haven't met him individually? Then Mnisi goes back to the questions that he started with, and he says, you admitted that when a person is arrested, they get searched and things are seized from them, etc. Keninda says yes. And he says, so during Danzi's arrest, you would assume that that was done. He was searched and his items were taken away from him. And he says yes. And then Mnisi goes into the issue of communication, how communication would have been broken between Danzi and the outside world for the time that he was in the police station. And Keninda says, well, he wasn't completely secluded because on the 22nd he did go to court. Are you trying to insinuate that Danzi received his phone when he was going to court? Because that's exactly what it sounds like you're saying, that the Danzi didn't have Danzi's communication wasn't restricted because on the 22nd he went to court. So therefore Buthelezi, being his friend who met with him, then would have given him a phone. Keninda, he does then confirm that Danzi's communication would have been restricted, obviously, but he does say that, they do get calls which are monitored at the police station. And Mnisi then says, yes, those calls are monitored. He can't just make a call without the police station knowing about it, kind of thing. And that was basically the end of the proceedings on Thursday. Mnisi is off to a wonderful start. The judge then asks Mnisi about how long he's still going to be with this witness. And Mnisi says, I'm still going to be very long. And I'm just like, that concludes the proceedings for the week. I am so looking forward to the bomb Mnisi wanted to drop. And clearly we'll be receiving that bomb on Tuesday because Keninda yet again is not available today, Friday and Monday. So we will proceed with the cross-examination of Advocate Mnisi on Tuesday next week. I hope you enjoy your weekend. I will see you in my next video. Bye.